What about Bridget's father?
He's not around.
How long has that been the case?
Since he found out I was pregnant 17 years ago, he never wanted anything to do with her.
Deb, would you sit down, please?
Where is he? Where is he living now?
South Carolina, Florida. Look, you're wasting your time with him, okay? Tyler Henrik. This is who you need to be looking at. They got into an argument last night. He admitted that. He never wanted her to have Jesse in the first place. And he's been violent with her before.
What do you mean he's been violent?
I mean, he's hit her. More than once. And Bridget never liked telling me all the shit he did. So if it was more than once, you can bet it was a lot more than that.
Has an incident report ever been filed?
I told her to file one, but she wasn't going to do that to the father of her kid. What I'm saying is all the boxes are checked off here.
And that's a clip from American Woman. I'm delighted to say I've been joined by its star, Sienna Miller. Hello, Sienna. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. Yes. Good afternoon. How do we find you?
How do you find me?
Yes. I imagine that you're quite buzzed and quite excited about this.
I am. I'm very excited. I think it's a very exciting thing when independent films get released. It's not an easy journey always, and I'm very proud of this one, so I'm thrilled.
How did you get involved?
I read the script, fell in love with this woman, and then had a meeting with Jake Scott, who is the director, and I was very flustered from a night shoot I'd been doing the night before and walked into the restaurant to meet him, banged into someone's table on the way in. And he said he'd cast me by the time I sat down because it was just the right
See,
mood.
I never believe those stories. You know, that sounds like a scene from a movie.
I know, but it's actually true. It was not deliberate, although he still thinks that a part of me did it on purpose. I did not.
So it was almost like an audition without it being an audition.
Not that I was aware of, but now I know that it might have been.
Yes. And the director is Jake Scott, who is, I'm just going to say it the once, is Ridley Scott's son, which is only relevant because when you come from that kind of heritage, it's going to rub off somewhere. And Ridley Scott's a producer on this movie, so it's all part of this package. But when you say it's an independent movie, what does that actually mean? Does that mean it's low budget?
It means there's just not enough money, yes. And that it doesn't necessarily mean it will be released. I mean, in order to get a distribution deal, somebody has to buy the film to release it. So it's made independently of a studio.
Okay, and it's made fast.
And it's made faster and it's harder work and people are there because they love being there, not because they're being paid to be there.
And what was it about the role of Deb, who is... without doubt, I mean, you are in every scene.
Yeah.
It's your picture, it's Deb's picture. What was it about the portrayal of Deb that made you think you wanted to be a part of it?
She just seemed like a very fully realised character in a way that I hadn't necessarily read before, certainly not in films. She begins as one woman and really ends as another woman. By the end of the film, she's gone on this odyssey and has emerged as a fully realised human being. And I think to have that space and time to change people's perception of the character you're playing, to be given the space as a woman in a film to do that is rare. I found her funny, I found her brave, stoic and clumsy and human.
The bare bones of the story are misleading, but tell them anyway. So what happens to Deb? What is certainly at the start of the movie,
Right.
What is it that's happening to her?
So she is a 32-year-old mother of a 16-year-old daughter who has a 2-year-old son.
So you're a grandma for the first time in
I'm
the
a
movie.
grandmother, yes. I'm a granny. And her 16-year-old goes missing and she is left to raise a 2-year-old son. And I think at the beginning of the film, she's 32, but she's really reliving the youth that was taken from her because she was such a young parent. So she's frivolous and she's messy and irresponsible. And she's catapulted back into motherhood. And her daughter is missing. But it's really not a missing person story. It's sort of about what is left in the aftermath of a tragedy like that. How do you carry on? And people do. How do you cope? How does it change you? How does the world around you change? It's a real character study of a woman on a journey that is at times unspeakably tragic. But she gets back up and there's humour in it. And I think it's something that you're left feeling sort of... hopefully it's inspiring by the end.
You said character study and you also said Odyssey, which are more helpful in terms of explaining the kind of movie that it is. Because as soon as you talk about a missing child, a lot of people, indeed I did, when I sort of read the kind of bare bones of it, thinking, oh, it's that kind of film. Mm-hmm. And it really isn't that kind of film. So it's quite difficult to explain what it is. But a study of this woman, Deb, and also her family. It's worth mentioning because the family that you were a part of is one of the most believable families that I think I've seen in recent years anyway.
Yeah.
Just explain a little bit about who they are and how they fit, because they're just like over the road, these guys.
Yeah. So there's a mother and two daughters, me and Christina Hendricks plays my sister, Kath. Kath and her husband, Terry, and two kids live across the road from Deb and her daughter and grandson. And Amy Madigan plays our mother, I think the dynamic, because the father died early on, the dynamic was really these three women. And it's fraught with love and fury and tension. But there is a deep sense of real love in spite of how people behave, which is often Deb behaving like a black sheep.
Yeah.
It felt really real to me too. I grew up in a house with a mother and a sister. That was also my dynamic. And Deb can be really unpleasant with her mother, and her mother has to stomach a lot of it. But you're never that far away from the feeling of love and how close, love and hate and resentment can be. They can all coexist. Kath is much more responsible, much more together, and sometimes despondent about her sister's behaviour. But there again is, especially between those two women, a really deep love. And that for me is the beating heart of the film, is the sisterly bond. And Christina Hendricks is incredible in this film.
She is very good. There's a lot of work for you. I mean, is there a movie that you've done where you've been in every scene before?
No, never. I've never been in every scene. And I've never really been the sole lead of a film. In fact, I haven't ever been the sole lead. I've always had a male co-star to lean on.
And why do you think that is?
I think people were making less films about women than they are now. I think people have sort of woken up in that town and realised that women represent over half the population and therefore should be represented in cinema in the same way that men have been. And I think there is more of an appetite for these kinds of stories. I mean, I want to look at a woman's life. I do. And I want to see that represented. I want to perform it, but also watch it. So hopefully this will be the start of... I don't have to be in every frame of every film again in the future, but I loved being sort of somewhat in charge of a narrative and having the time and space to really develop a character in a complete way.
And did it... So you think that there is a greater interest now in women's stories? There has been a shift in how those stories are told?
I think there's always been the interest. I just think it's been completely undernourished by Hollywood. And I think because of what's going on in the world and the movements taking place in every industry, but certainly Hollywood is very aware of itself because it's had a huge spotlight shone on it. I think people are much more focused on hiring female directors, female writers, female-centric stories. There is more diversity in cinema. All of these things. It was a very patriarchal kind of system.
What's interesting, I think I'm right in saying, so we've already mentioned Jake Scott's the director.
Yeah.
Is a man who wrote the story. So, I mean, it feels like a very female-centric picture written and directed by guys. So you can't make...
Yes.
Hard and fast rules. I guess you can't make hard and fast rules given that you're the only English person in this film.
I think, but Jake's an English man. Yes. Yeah, I'm not saying that everything has to be completely produced and directed by women. I think the best people for the job is always the right decision, but I do like to see these female-centered stories being made.
Are there in America, they're raised eyebrows because you are an American working class woman in the middle of an American working class family. Like, as I said to you, I think it's one of the best families that I've seen portrayed in a movie for a long time. And that's clearly not you.
No.
That's not your background. But you were clearly that bumping into Jake in the restaurant, did it? Was that odd?
Was that what being an English person?
Was it just...
Or should I be able to?
Hence the title. I mean, you live in America.
I actually
you were
have an
born in
American
America.
passport. Yeah. So I could argue that
so it is
one.
part of it. But
I'm clearly English. I know I have no desire to play myself or a version of myself in films. I would like the opportunity to play a vast range of different characters from different places. I think that's what's interesting to me about this job. But just in reference to it being the first time in, I'm not sure how long I've been working, maybe 15, 16 years, the first time that I've really carried a film is pretty extraordinary.
And you've said before you still think about this character that you played, this Deb. That must be an odd feeling for you.
It is, but these people, you sort of absorb a little bit of each character that you play somehow. You embody it so completely, or at least I do, and certainly did with this, that it's not something that you particularly want to say goodbye to. I like to just imagine them, and I suppose when I'm older, I'll just be an amalgam of every sort of, be some mildly schizophrenic old lady.
Did you take her home? And it was one of the characters that stayed with you when you went home after shooting?
I did. And certainly while we were shooting. I mean, I'm not somebody that will stay in character completely the whole time, but I like to hold on to little bits of it. And just with her, I think I felt such love and empathy for that woman and that experience. And that woman really is an American woman. And I think there are a lot of women in America that are just unseen and struggling and coping. It probably relates to an empathy for a whole breadth of society that I don't really know and want to.
Given that you spend an awful lot of the film worrying and fretting about what's happened to your disappeared daughter. I know you met with parents of disappeared children. That must have been one of the tougher bits of research you've had to do.
Yeah, that whole element of the film is something that is a nightmare for any parent or any human being, I think, can empathize with what that would be like. And obviously to tell a story about losing a child it would be really irresponsible to not spend a lot of time talking to people and hearing about that experience without ever being able to fully understand what it is. But one of the people I met with told me his story, and I said, I can't imagine what that would be like. I cannot bear the thought. And he said, you can imagine what it is, and you have. And that's exactly what it's like. And it's that feeling of, your heart sinks when you read these stories or see those news conferences. And sitting in that space in a strange way, acting is such a bizarre job that you want to look at your worst nightmare and you want to sit in it. It's very torturous, but there's catharsis in it somehow, and I can't articulate why.
Having carried this film and put in what I think a lot of people are saying is one of your finest performances ever, maybe your finest, will you expect more from a script? I mean, obviously you read this script and you thought, this is the one for me. You're about to be in 21 Bridges with Chadwick Boseman, but this will change what people expect from you, won't it?
I hope so. Although I've said that before, and it depends. I think that Hollywood can be unimaginative in casting. Although I just did this TV show, The Loudest Voice, where I really don't resemble myself at all. And I think the combination of that,
The one where you're married to Russell Crowe.
to Russell Crowe, who is Roger Ailes, the charming founder of Fox News, and I hope that if you line up the three characters that I have that in the projects that are released this year, you could say that I'm capable of doing very, very different things. I would hope that this would lead to equally rich and complicated characters, but let's see.
And maybe if you get involved in production, then maybe you can make sure that these characters are coming your way anyway.
I want to produce, and I never have the impulse to produce things for me. I always think about casting other people. I don't have, it's funny. That part of it doesn't, I should probably do that. Start creating my own content.
Yes. So you're interested in getting involved in production, but not for yourself?
I don't necessarily think about it in terms of something for me, no. I like the idea of making a film, but I'm not out there looking for, I could play that part or that part. It's more, that would be a good film. Weirdly.
Yes.
I'm just realising this as
maybe
we
be
talk.
part of the, making sure that those roles come your way would be to
create them
create
myself.
them, yeah.
Maybe. I think you're probably right. And I think the women who are really doing well in Hollywood are doing that. So I should take a leaf out of that book.
Can you tell us about 21 Bridges?
21 Bridges is like a Sidney Lumet style cop thriller. It takes place in one night, and I can't remember the amount of cops that are murdered, but several. And me and Chadwick Boseman have one night to catch these killers, and we close the island of Manhattan for one night. The 21 Bridges of Manhattan is locked down. So it's a very high octane, kind of adrenaline fueled chase.
Sounds great.
Yeah, very different.
Yes,
much more shiny.
So there's the TV,
The Loudest Voice. Yeah.
the Loudest Voice. There's the shiny 21 Bridges, and there's the definitely not shiny American Woman. But I think it's going to be a big deal, and I think people will love the performance of Sienna Miller as Deb. Sienna, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.